most of these multi-million-dollar guaranteed bonuses. The New York Times article went on to describe talent wars among the banks bidding up salaries of derivatives traders, currency speculators, and computer trading programmers, etc., so that the salaries on Wall Street, at the top at least, are not just staying where they were, but they're increasing.
That's right. The contract they've made with their traders give them a guaranteed share of the profits they make. Of course, they're not really profits, remember. If they were profits, they'd have to pay interest on them. So traders don't make profits. They make capital gains that are taxed at only a fraction of what wage earners have to get. So the government subsidizes the traders. They subsidize financial parasitism by saying, we want the economy to stop producing industrial goods, to stop earning an income. We want the whole economy to operate on the basis of capital gains, of trading everything back and forth. This is the post-industrial economy. We don't have to produce anything, and to make sure that we make money by trading, we're going to count all the trading profits as capital gains, and not only are they officially taxed at only half the rate of earned income, wages and profits, but if you take these gains and you use them to buy yet more property, you don't have to pay at all. So, as Leona Helmsley said, only the little people pay taxes, which means only labor and industry pay taxes, not Wall Street.
Yes, her quote is one of my favorites of all time. Do you think that she went to jail because she was telling the truth?
No, she went to jail because she falsified her reports. And the fact is, had she handled things differently in an accounting basis, her principal was right, but she was cheating on her tax return, and it became very embarrassing for the government not to throw her in jail. But they did agree not to throw her husband in jail.
According to your article, instead of real financial reform, Obama's plan capitulates to Wall Street. You talk about a financial regulatory reform proposal of Obama's that promotes Wall Street's product, debt creation, at the expense of the economy at large, and lets financial chieftains continue to self-regulate the debt industry, and, by the way, to keep all their gains from the past decade's worth of fraudulent lending scot-free. Does Obama's plan make the Federal Reserve the sole regulator? What's going on?
The people he's appointed are the neoliberals from the Clinton administration who were advocating the repeal of Glass-Steagall in 1999 that led to all of these problems. Essentially, his economic team consists of Wall Street lobbyists. And what Obama is being told is, how do we deregulate Wall Street so that the government has no power at all to regulate us or to tell us what we can do? Well, they've come up with a brilliant plan. All you need to do is take regulatory authority away from every government agency, take regulatory authority away from every court, and put it in the hands of the Federal Reserve, and then put an ideological fanatic such as Alan Greenspan in charge of the Federal Reserve, who refuses to regulate, just as Alan Greenspan refused to regulate. Wall Street, which for the last 100 years has been against all regulation, calling it socialism, is saying this is a wonderful idea. Yes, we want to be regulated by just one central authority, the Federal Reserve, because they know that the Federal Reserve, its role is to act as a lobbyist for the commercial banking system on Wall Street. So by appointing Federal Reserve, the bank regulator, essentially you've appointed its own lobbyist as a self-regulator, which means a non-regulator. So all you have to do is put someone like Ben Bernanke in charge of the Fed, and the Fed will just tell the Wall Street, do whatever makes money. What's good for you is good for the economy, even if it's strangling the economy, even if it's leading to higher unemployment, even if it's deindustrializing the economy and polarizing the economy between creditors and debtors.
I'm speaking with financial economist and historian Dr. Michael Hudson. Today's show, Dress Rehearsal for Debt Peonage. I'm Bonnie Faulkner. This is Guns and Butter. Now, you mentioned Glass-Steagall, and in the same article of yours, you point out that Paul Volcker was brought in as an economic advisor for Obama's reforms, and indeed the former Fed chairman, Mr. Greenspan's predecessor, gave some good advice. Reverse the repeal of Glass-Steagall. What happened to this?
He was brought in largely for window dressing because people had respect for him. So you want to bring in a group of people who are trotted out as advisors, and then you ignore everybody whose advice you don't want to take. So obviously his advice is not being taken. In other words, investment banking is not the same thing as commercial banking. Commercial banking is supposed to be basically a public utility, not a means of financing and making money. And Paul Volcker said these two things are just the opposite. As a matter of fact, I had lunch just last week with one of my old Chase Manhattan friends who used to work with Paul Volcker, and he was reminding me of just the difference in philosophy between our generation and between the new generation that somehow has been convinced that what's good for Wall Street is good for the economy, although Wall Street's product is debt. And it makes its money off debt. It makes its money off collecting interest on debt in the first place, and then collecting predatory fees and late fees and payments and foreclosing when the debts can't be paid. So this is a difference in generations by people really who didn't ever grow up with a experience of a financial downturn.
Since Ben Bernanke is the head of the Fed, should he be the sole regulator? And why would Wall Street want Ben Bernanke as its chief regulator?
The reason Wall Street wants Bernanke as a regulator would be clear if you look back at what he wrote in 2004. He gave a speech that's on the Fed website to the Eastern Economic Association called The Great Moderation. And he also gave a speech to the Fed called The Great Moderation. Now, here in 2004, he said the period, the last 25 years, from 1979 to 2004, have been a great moderation. If you look at employment and output, it's never been so stable. Well, if you look at the balance sheet for 1979 to 2004, this is the greatest immoderation in American economic history. In 1979, you had the wealthiest 1% of the people, as I think I've said in your program before, having 37% of the wealth. By 2004, they'd increased their share of America's returns to wealth, that is interest, rent, dividends, and capital gains, to 57%. And it's just about twice that now. Bernanke has a blind spot. Although he's nominally head of the Federal Reserve that deals with finance, finance plays no role in his mind at all. In order to be head of the Federal Reserve, in order to have a financial regulatory position in government, you have to ignore finance. You have to ignore debt. You have to assume that debt is not a problem. It's only a solution. And you have to assume that the financial sector adds to national output, not act as an overhead, absorbing wages and turning them into interest payments, absorbing corporate profits and diverting corporate cash flow away from capital investment into interest payments. You have to be blind as to the effect of finance on the economy. And this blind spot goes all the way back to Ricardo, who was a lobbyist for the bank sector in England after the Napoleonic Wars ended in 1815. And the blind spot is inherent in the Chicago School of Milton Friedman and the University of Chicago monetarists. So it seems ironic that a school that should call itself monetarist and free market actually doesn't have any role for debt at all. It imagines, as Mr. Bernanke does, that money and debt merely reflect the real economy's earning power. So in their analysis, the value of an asset is you take the earnings or the income that it can pay, and you capitalize it at the going rate of interest, and you say, how much can one borrow against that amount of income? How much can you borrow against a corporation that earns so much profit? How much can you borrow against a real estate that earns so much rent over taxes? And whatever banks will lend, that's the value of wealth. So they define wealth in terms of how much a bank can lend and how much of this wealth can be absorbed and turned into interest payments for Wall Street. Well, of course, once all of the national surplus is turned into interest, there's no money for rising living standards, there's no money for increased capital investment, and the economy goes into depression.